12 years ago, in the city of Khost in eastern Afghanistan, Osama bin Laden, Ayman al-Zawahiri, and 3 other individuals declared war on the United States of America and declared war on every single American, man, woman, and child. In the 12 years since then, their organization, Al-Qaeda, which means the base in Arabic, has waged a campaign of terror and carnage across 5 continents, from Bali, Indonesia, to Washington, D.C., to New York, to London, to Madrid, to virtually every city in the Islamic world. This organization has carried out dozens of gruesome terrorist attacks. It has become today the world's first truly global terrorist organization. It has a headquarters somewhere in the mountains along the Pakistan-Afghanistan border. It has franchises in different parts of the Islamic world, in Yemen, in Iraq, in North Africa, in Southeast Asia. It has cells supporting its terrorist operations throughout most of the Muslim diaspora. In the last year, we've seen those cells in the United States, for example, in the attack on Fort Hood. And it continues to wage what it calls raids on America. It was foiled last Christmas, but we can be certain that's not the end of them. The first rule of war is to know your enemy. And surprisingly, we don't know very much about our enemy. We haven't devoted the attention and the resources. In the Cold War, we built institutions of higher learning across the United States of America to study the Soviet Union and Communist China. But we haven't devoted the same kind of effort to trying to understand the enemy we face today. When I retired from the CIA 3 years ago, I thought I would try to fill the gap. And that's what the search for Al-Qaeda is all about, trying to give a better understanding for Americans and for people beyond America as well, the nature of the enemy we face. Why do they hate us? Why do they attack us? Who are their leaders? What are their strong points and what are their vulnerabilities? Now, a book written about a bunch of murderers hiding on the other side of the planet who don't give a lot of interviews to journalists or to academics, and you really don't want to do an interview with them given their declaration that they're going to kill every American they can find, is a bit of a daunting task. The research for this book then had to be a little bit unusual. Fortunately, they're not bashful. If anything, they're quite eager to put their story out. And in the 10 years since September 11th, they've put out scores of audio tapes and videotapes and several books explaining why it is they do what they do and what their intentions are. These are not easy-to-read books. They're filled with allusions to Islamic history. They're filled with allusions to the Quran. And you have to have a pretty good reference point in order to figure out where they're going. But if you have that, they tell a very clear story and give you a pretty clear statement of what their ideology is and what their narrative of history is. I've read all of those, and in addition to that, I tried my best to interview people who've over the years had an opportunity to meet Osama bin Laden or Ayman Zawahiri, or to deal with some of the other characters in Al-Qaeda, like Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, the late leader of Al-Qaeda in Iraq. This gave me the opportunity to interview people like Prince Turki, the head of Saudi intelligence, or the Indian foreign minister who dealt with Al-Qaeda when it hijacked an Indian jetliner in 1999. These interviews were a significant way of supplementing the record from Al-Qaeda itself. I hope that what emerges from that is a relatively clear and incisive analysis of what Al-Qaeda is, where it came from, and where it's going. It's organized around 4 biographies: Osama bin Laden, Ayman Zawahiri, Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, and Mullah Omar, the head of the Taliban, the man who's leading the war against us in Afghanistan today. I try also at the end to give some recommendations on how to proceed forward. We need a policy for dealing with Al-Qaeda that goes after it in every aspect, that uses smart weapons, including drones, to target the leadership, but also uses smart weapons in the battle of ideas in order to wage the struggle for the hearts and minds of the Islamic world. It's a nexus, it's a synergy of different strategies that have to be brought together in order to defeat this enemy. And of course, we have to do it in a way in which we keep our heads sober. We need to ensure that we don't overreact, that we don't panic, that we maintain our civil liberties and our freedoms here at home. At the end of the day, Al-Qaeda is a very, very serious threat to the United States of America. But let's keep it in proportion. Al-Qaeda is not Nazi Germany that controls all of Europe. It's not the Soviet Union that has thousands upon thousands of nuclear weapons trained at the United States. It's a relatively small group of fanatics who are determined to attack this country. But I think if we keep in proportion the nature of the threat, we can come up with the strategies in order to defeat it. Thank you.
Thanks. Shane?
Thanks, Ben. Well, thank you all again for coming, and thank you to the Key School for hosting us. This is really a fabulous event, and I'm honored to be here. My book is The Watchers, The Rise of America's Surveillance State, and I thought just I'd try and give you sort of a sense of the sweep of the story, because it is a work of narrative nonfiction that takes place over a 25-year period, roughly from October of 2003 to early 2000, October of 1983, to early 2009, and covers a lot of ground in the area of sort of digital surveillance, electronic surveillance, people in government who are trying to build computer systems to organize information in order to predict the future, essentially. But I thought it was worth giving you a little bit of background of how I came to write the book and how I arrived at this sort of central figure and rather unlikely hero of the narrative, who happens to be one of the most notorious political figures of the past quarter century, and that's retired Admiral John Poindexter, who many of you all will know from his central role in the Iran-Contra affair in the 1980s. And it's sort of an unlikely bit of a path to making him the centerpiece of this book. But just quickly, I was a journalist in 2001 covering sort of the intersection of government and technology, particularly in the intelligence community after 9/11, for a magazine in Washington called Government Executive. And very quickly a theme emerged after the attacks that the intelligence community and the government, the law enforcement agencies, had all of this information about Al-Qaeda and all these various silos, and that none of it was being shared and correlated, and that one hand wasn't talking to the other, and that this failure to connect the dots was one of the principal causes for the surprise attack on 9/11. So it came to pass that everybody who was in the technology field at that time sort of came forward what they thought was the magic bullet solution to fixing this problem of how we're going to organize the data, finally see what we can't see, and achieve some huge level of awareness about intelligence. And John Poindexter had come back to government in charge of one of these main projects at the Defense Department. His background, of course, was as a Navy man, but he had a real proclivity for information technology going all the way back to the early 80s, and had shown a real aptitude for computers and for design. And he came up with a program at the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, or DARPA, which is sort of the Pentagon's big futurist brain trust, that he coined Total Information Awareness, to describe this system that would achieve what it is that the Watchers, the people I write about in the book, have been trying to do for many years: gather up all the available intelligence there was about a particular organization or a particular threat and try and analyze it and predict the future. The thing that was remarkable about Poindexter's idea, which was not unique in terms of the people pitching these ideas at the time, was that he wasn't just looking to go find information that was in government databases. He actually proposed going beyond that. And the rationale was that if the hijackers on 9/11 were moving about in the United States before the attacks, if they were opening bank accounts, if they were communicating, if they were renting apartments, renting cars, traveling around, they were leaving electronic footprints with every one of those actions that required a transaction in the digital ether, and that the government had to go out and find that data as well and harness it. And of course, this would probably require a rather radical rewrite of our privacy laws, much less our concept of what privacy and individual privacy meant in this information age. The second part of the plan, which struck me as entirely novel at the time, was the idea of using the very same technology that he wanted to employ for sophisticated data mining or pattern analysis, if you like, of regular people, and to turn that system back on the very government agents who were using it as sort of a constant eye watching the watchers, to try and set up a system whereby, ideally anyway, it would be very difficult for anyone to abuse this kind of power and system without being noticed.